Lena never thought curiosity could destroy something so steady. For 7 years, she and David had built a quiet, simple life together in Seattle. Their days moved in rhythm: coffee in the mornings, work, dinner, a little TV, then bed. It was calm, predictable, safe. And maybe that was the problem. Somewhere between routine and silence, love had turned into comfort, and comfort had turned into distance. David was kind, always had been. But kindness didn't fill the silence that followed him home every night. He worked long hours as an architect, coming back tired, distracted, his eyes still focused on unfinished designs. He'd smile when she asked about his day, kiss her on the forehead, and then disappear into the quiet of his own thoughts. Lena would sit on the couch, scrolling through her phone, feeling both grateful and lonely at the same time. She didn't plan to drift. She just wanted to feel seen again, to feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. Then Ethan joined her marketing firm. He was new, confident, and different from the people she usually worked with. He had a calm energy, someone who noticed the little things others missed. The first time they talked, he complimented her work on a campaign. "You have great instincts," he'd said with a smile. It was a small comment, but it stuck with her. She couldn't remember the last time someone had said something like that. Over the next few weeks, they became friends. They had lunch together, joked about their boss, shared music playlists. It felt harmless. But soon, their conversations drifted beyond work. Ethan asked personal questions, not the surface kind, but ones that made her think. What made you want to do marketing? Are you happy in Seattle? What do you want that you don't have? No one had asked her that in years. Lena told herself it was just friendship. But every message from him made her heart race a little faster. When her phone buzzed, she'd glance at David, asleep on the couch, and feel a pang of guilt. She tried to ignore it, but curiosity grew. Curiosity about what she was missing, who she was outside of her marriage, and what it would feel like to be wanted again. One late evening, after a stressful day, Ethan texted, "Do you ever feel like your life doesn't fit you anymore?" Lena read it 3 times before replying, "Yes, every single day." That was the moment something quietly shifted. After that, they talked more late at night, when David was asleep. Their conversations became deeper, softer. She told Ethan about her fears, her dreams, how she felt invisible in her own house. He listened. He understood. And that made everything even more dangerous. At home, she began to notice the distance more clearly. David's good mornings sounded automatic. His "I love you" felt like habit. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't there. When she tried to talk, he nodded without really hearing. It was as if they were living side by side but in different worlds. One evening while folding laundry, she caught herself thinking about Ethan, his laugh, his questions, his eyes, and it scared her. She shook her head, whispering, "Stop it." But she couldn't. The next day, Ethan stopped by her desk. "You okay?" he asked. "Just tired," she said, "from work or life." He teased gently. She smiled despite herself. "Both." He laughed. "Then we're in the same boat." That easy connection, that sense of being understood, was something she hadn't felt in years. It became addictive. One rainy Friday, everyone left work early, but Lena stayed behind to finish a project. The building was quiet when Ethan appeared by her door. "Need a ride home?" he asked. She hesitated. "It's fine. I'll call an Uber." "It's pouring," he said, smiling. "Let me drive you," she agreed. The ride was calm at first. The rain hit the windshield like steady music. Then he said softly, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Her throat tightened. "Sometimes." He looked at her. "You deserve to feel alive again." She didn't respond. The silence in the car was heavy. Not awkward, more like something was being said without words. When they reached her house, she thanked him quietly. "See you Monday," she said, stepping out quickly before she could say anything else. Inside. David was asleep on the couch, a book still open in his lap. The sight broke something inside her. She wanted to sit beside him, wake him, tell him how lost she felt, but she didn't. She just stood there, staring, whispering. "I'm sorry," though he couldn't hear. Over the next few weeks, she tried to fix things. She cooked David's favorite dinner, planned a small weekend trip, asked about his day. He smiled, grateful but distant. The spark didn't come back. She felt like she was talking to someone behind glass, close enough to see but too far to reach. At work, Ethan noticed the sadness in her voice. "You're quiet today," he said. "I'm trying to figure myself out," she replied. He smiled gently. "Maybe stop trying and just feel." That sentence stayed with her. She started to wonder if love was supposed to feel like this, stable but empty. And if it wasn't, then what was she doing wrong? Then came the evening that changed everything. David had planned a small dinner at home. He lit candles, cooked pasta, poured wine. It should have been romantic. But Lena's mind was elsewhere, thinking about Ethan, about that word he used, alive. Halfway through dinner, David looked up and said softly, "You've been distant lately." She froze. "Just work," she said automatically. He studied her for a moment. "You've said that all week." She tried to laugh, but it came out weak. "Well, it's true." He smiled faintly and looked down at his plate. "Okay." He didn't press further. That hurt her more than if he had. After dinner, he went to bed early. She sat alone in the living room, staring at the rain on the window, feeling guilt twist inside her. David's silence wasn't anger. It was something worse, quiet acceptance. He knew something was changing, and he was too tired to stop it. The next week, Ethan asked her to meet for coffee after work. She knew she shouldn't. Every voice in her head said no. But curiosity whispered louder, "Just talk. It's harmless." They met at a quiet cafe by the harbor. The lights were warm, the smell of coffee mixed with rain. They talked for hours about everything, childhood dreams, regrets, what they wanted out of life. When Ethan looked at her, it felt like he could see every unspoken thought she'd buried for years. As she left, he said softly, "You don't have to keep pretending, Lena." Her heart raced. Pretending what? That you're happy. She couldn't answer. When she got home that night, David was at the table waiting. A candle burned low beside untouched food. He looked up, calm but tired. "You didn't answer my texts." "My phone died." She lied. He nodded slowly. "Okay." He didn't argue, didn't accuse. He just stood, placed his hand on her shoulder, and said quietly, "I'll be in the bedroom if you want to talk." Then he walked away. She stood there frozen, the air heavy with unspoken truth. His silence said everything. He knew. That night she lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, guilt pressing down like weight. She could feel his quiet breathing next to her, calm, steady, forgiving. And that broke her even more, because David wasn't the kind of man who yelled. He was the kind who hurt in silence. And in that silence, Lena finally realized what she had done. Not just to him, but to herself. She had traded honesty for attention, certainty for curiosity, love for something that only felt alive for a moment, as rain fell outside. Soft and endless, she whispered into the dark, "What have I done?" No answer came, only the quiet sound of a man who still loved her, even if he couldn't say it anymore. The days that followed felt heavier than ever. Every morning Lena woke beside David and wondered how she had gotten here. How a small curiosity had become a quiet secret she couldn't undo. David's silence had changed things. He didn't accuse her, didn't question where she went or who she spoke to. But that calmness carried a weight she couldn't bear. It wasn't ignorance. It was awareness. And that was far worse at breakfast. He still made her coffee, still smiled, still asked how she'd slept. But there was a distance behind his eyes, something measured, something watching. She couldn't tell if he was waiting for her to speak or if he had already accepted that she never would. She tried to act normal. She went to work, replied to emails, laughed with her coworkers, even with Ethan. But the laughter didn't sound the same. Something had changed between them. He could sense her guilt, and she could feel his quiet expectation. He didn't pressure her. He didn't even mention what happened or what nearly happened between them. But every time she looked at him, she saw the version of herself that had been reckless enough to forget what she already had. One afternoon, Ethan stopped by her desk. "You've been quiet," he said softly. "I'm just tired." She replied. He hesitated before saying, "You don't owe me an explanation, Lena. But whatever this is, maybe you should figure out what you really want." That sentence hit her harder than she expected. What do you really want? She thought she knew once. Love, peace, a steady life. But now, peace felt dull and love felt confusing. That evening, she came home to find David in the kitchen, stirring soup on the stove. The small, familiar gesture made her chest tighten. "Hey," she said quietly. He turned, smiled faintly. "Hey," she walked closer, unsure how to start. "Smells good. Chicken noodle," he said. "You always liked it on cold days." Was such a small, thoughtful thing, but it undid her. She wanted to speak, to confess everything, but fear locked her throat. He looked at her for a long second before turning back to the stove. "You don't have to say anything," he said quietly. "I just want you to eat." The calm in his voice shattered her. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, watching the soft glow of the moon through the curtains. David's breathing was steady beside her, but she could tell he wasn't asleep either. The silence between them was louder than any argument could have been. Finally, she whispered, "David." He didn't move. "Are you awake?" After a long pause, he said, "Yeah." She swallowed hard. "I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, his eyes tired but gentle. "I know," he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes. "You know." He nodded. "Not everything, but enough." The room felt like it stopped breathing. She sat up, hands trembling. "David, he interrupted softly, "don't lie. Not tonight." It's the way he said it, calm, quiet, broken, made her heart ache. She wiped her eyes, shaking. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to. I was just curious." He didn't flinch. He just looked at her with a deep sadness. "Curious," he repeated slowly. "About what?" She hesitated, searching for words. "About how it would feel to be seen again. To feel something different. I didn't realize what I was losing until it was already too late." David leaned back against the pillow, his face unreadable. "Did you ever stop to think about what I was feeling?" "Yes," she whispered. "Every day. I just didn't know how to talk to you anymore. You were so quiet, so far away, and you thought the answer was someone else." His tone wasn't angry, just tired, disappointed in a way that hurt more than shouting ever could. "I thought the answer was remembering who I was," she said, tears spilling down her face. "But I forgot what we were." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I guess I thought we were okay. I thought silence meant peace. Maybe it meant we were fading." Neither of them spoke for a while. The sound of rain tapping the window filled the room. Finally, he said, "Did you love him?" Her eyes widened. "No, it wasn't love." He nodded slowly. "Then what was it?" She hesitated. "A mistake." He gave a sad half-smile. "Mistakes are supposed to teach us something." "They do," she said. "They taught me what I'm losing." He looked at her for a long moment, then turned away. "I don't know if that's enough, Lena." His words were soft, but they hit her harder than any scream. The following days felt like walking through fog. David didn't mention their conversation again. He didn't leave, didn't pack bags, didn't slam doors. He still made breakfast, still asked about her day, still said goodnight. But everything was different. Every gesture felt like a ghost of what it used to be, polite, gentle, hollow dot at work. Lena avoided Ethan. She needed space, needed to breathe. When she passed him in the hallway, he just nodded. He seemed to understand that their story had already reached its quiet end. Weeks passed like this, two people sharing a house, memories, and silence. Then one evening, as Lena came home, she found David sitting on the couch with an envelope in his hand. Her heart stopped. "What's that?" she asked softly. He looked at her, eyes calm. "A job offer, Chicago." She froze. "You're moving." He nodded. "They've been asking for months. I think I'm going to take it." She sat down across from him, her voice breaking. "So that's it." He took a long breath. "Lena, I don't hate you. I could never hate you. But I can't keep pretending nothing happened. I tried to move past it, but every time I look at you, I remember. She whispered, I don't want to lose you. He looked at her, eyes full of quiet sadness. You already did. You just didn't notice when it happened. The room fell silent. The only sound was the slow ticking of the clock. After a long moment, she stood and walked toward him. If you go, will you ever come back? He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe someday, when we're both different people. Her heart broke all over again. The night before his flight, they sat together on the couch without speaking. It wasn't awkward, it was peaceful in a painful way. They didn't need words. Everything that could be said had already been said. Finally, David turned to her. Do you remember the first time we met? She smiled faintly through tears. The bookstore on Fifth Avenue? You dropped a coffee on my shoes. He laughed softly. I was so nervous I offered to buy you new ones. And I said no because I wanted an excuse to see you again, she whispered. He nodded. I remember thinking, I'm never letting this woman go. She looked at him, her voice trembling. Then why are you? He sighed. Because sometimes loving someone means knowing when to stop holding on. That line stayed with her long after he went to bed. At the airport the next morning, Lena drove him there. Neither spoke during the ride. When they reached the terminal, he turned to her and said quietly, I hope you find what you were curious about. Her throat tightened. It wasn't worth losing you. He gave her a small, gentle smile. Then maybe that's the lesson. Okay. She wanted to stop him, to beg him to stay, but she couldn't. She had done enough talking too late. He hugged her once, softly, and then walked away without looking back. She stood there until he disappeared into the crowd that night. The house felt impossibly empty. Every sound echoed. Every memory hurt. She walked into their bedroom and sat on the bed, staring at the empty side where his things used to be, on the nightstand. She found a note in his handwriting. I didn't say a word because I wanted you to hear the silence. Sometimes silence says everything. She read it over and over, tears falling onto the paper. For the first time in months, Lena realized she wasn't just sorry, she was changed. Curiosity had shown her what life without love felt like. It wasn't freedom. It was loneliness wrapped in regret. In the weeks that followed, Lena didn't see Ethan again. She deleted his number, moved to a smaller apartment, started writing again, something she hadn't done since college. Each word she wrote felt like rebuilding a piece of herself. She learned to live with quiet, not as punishment, but as understanding. David never called, but she didn't blame him. Some endings weren't about anger or betrayal. Some were just about growing apart, one choice at a time. Still, every now and then, when the rain hit her window, she thought of that night, the silence, his calm voice, and the love that didn't shout but simply walked away. And every time she whispered the same thing into the quiet. I learned, David, I finally learned. The first few months after David left felt endless. The house was quiet in a way that made every sound echo. The mornings were the hardest. Lena would wake up expecting to hear the faint hum of coffee brewing. The soft sound of him moving around, but there was nothing, just silence and her own breathing. The bed felt too big, the air too still. She had thought heartbreak would come, like thunder, loud and sudden. Instead, it arrived like fog, slow and unshakable, covering everything she once loved. Work became her escape. She arrived early, stayed late, and filled every moment with something to do. But no matter how busy she stayed, the guilt never really left. Ethan had transferred to another branch a few weeks after David left, leaving her with no reminders but memories. She didn't blame him. Their story had ended the moment she realized what it had cost her. One evening, as she walked home under a gray Seattle sky, she passed by the same cafe where she and Ethan once met. Through the window, she saw two people laughing, leaning close, eyes bright with new affection. For a moment, she felt that old ache, that longing to be wanted. But then she caught her reflection in the glass and realized something. That longing had never really been about love. It had been about emptiness, and trying to fill it with someone else had only made the hole bigger. She kept walking, slower this time, thinking of David. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. And with time, the silence became less painful, more peaceful. She learned to enjoy her own company. She started journaling every night, something she hadn't done in years. Writing helped her understand her choices, not excuse them, but understand them. She realized how much of her life she had spent waiting to be seen instead of learning to see herself. On weekends, she began volunteering at a small animal shelter near her neighborhood. It was simple work, feeding, cleaning, helping people adopt. But it made her feel useful again. One afternoon, while walking a golden retriever named Max, a woman around her age smiled and said, "You seem peaceful." Lena laughed softly. "Not always, but I'm learning." The woman smiled. "That's the hard part. Learning peace." That night, Lena wrote those words in her journal. Peace is something you earn by facing yourself. It took almost a year before she heard from David again. The message came unexpectedly. A short email with no subject line. "Hey, I hope you're doing okay. Chicago's been good. The work is intense, but it keeps me grounded. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're finding your footing again. Take care of yourself." She read it 3 times, her hands trembling slightly. He didn't mention the past, didn't ask questions, didn't reopen old wounds. It was a message of quiet closure, and somehow it hurt and healed her at the same time. She typed a reply but stopped halfway. What could she possibly say? "I'm sorry, felt too small. I miss you" felt selfish. In the end, she just wrote, "Thank you, David. I'm learning to be better." Then she hit send. Months passed. Life started to move again. She decorated her apartment with small plants, learned to cook for one, started running in the mornings. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened. Sometimes she caught herself smiling without realizing it. One Sunday morning, she visited the bookstore on Fifth Avenue, the same one where she and David had first met. The bell over the door chimed softly as she entered. The smell of paper and coffee instantly brought back memories. She walked past the fiction shelves and paused near the corner where David had once spilled his drink on her shoes. She smiled faintly at the thought. An older woman beside her noticed her smile and said, "You just remembered something nice, didn't you?" Lena nodded. "Yes, something nice and a little sad." The woman smiled kindly. "That's how you know it mattered." Later that evening, Lena sat by her window, watching the rain fall just like it had that night, the night David hadn't said a word. The same calm rain, the same city sounds in the distance. But she was different now. The silence didn't scare her anymore. It felt like a companion, not a punishment. She thought about all the things she'd learned, how easily love could be taken for granted, how curiosity could blur the line between need and want, and how forgiveness, real forgiveness, had to start within. She didn't know if David would ever come back, and for the first time, said she didn't build her peace around that possibility. 2 years later, life had found a rhythm again. Lena had been promoted to lead her department at work. She'd made new friends, traveled to places she used to only dream about: Portland, Vancouver, even New York for a short conference. But the biggest change wasn't where she went. It was how she carried herself. One cold December morning, she received an invitation in her inbox. It was from an old mutual friend's small reunion dinner this weekend. "You should come. David might be there too." Her heart skipped a beat. 2 years. She hadn't seen him, hadn't heard his voice since that final airport goodbye. She wasn't sure if she was ready, but something inside her whispered, "Go." The dinner was held at a cozy restaurant downtown. Warm lights, soft music, familiar laughter. When she walked in, her friends greeted her warmly, and for a moment it felt like no time had passed. Then, across the table, she saw him. David looked older, but in a graceful way. His hair was shorter, his eyes calm, his smile the same, gentle, patient. When their eyes met, time seemed to pause. He gave her a small nod and she smiled back. They didn't speak much at first. The group laughed and shared stories, the air filled with warmth and memories. But as the evening went on, David finally approached her near the bar. "Hey, he said quietly. Hey, she replied. He smiled faintly. You look good. So do you, she said. Hey, she meant it. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before she said, I got your email. I never said thank you. He nodded. You didn't have to. I wanted to, she said. It meant a lot. He looked at her for a long moment. You seem lighter. She smiled softly. I had to be. I didn't like who I was. He nodded again. Neither did I, back then. I blamed myself for a long time, thinking I'd stopped trying, stopped listening. She met his eyes. We both stopped, David. I just made the bigger mistake. He sighed gently. We were young. We thought love could survive on autopilot. There was no bitterness in his voice, only acceptance. As the night ended, they walked outside together. Snow had started to fall, quiet and soft. They stood on the sidewalk, hands in their pockets, breath visible in the cold air. I never stopped caring about you, David said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes shining. I know, and I never stopped wishing I had done things differently. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's enough. We don't have to rewrite what happened. We just have to carry it better. She nodded, tears glimmering but not falling. You sound wiser. He chuckled softly. Pain does that. They stood there a moment longer, just watching the snow. It wasn't the kind of reunion that promised second chances. It was something gentler, forgiveness without expectation, closure without finality. As he turned to leave, she said, David. He stopped. Thank you, she said quietly, for not yelling, for not hating me, for letting silence do the talking. He smiled a real warm smile. Sometimes silence says more than anger ever could. And then he walked away into the falling snow. Lena watched him disappear down the street. Her heart didn't ache the way it once did. Instead, it felt calm, like she had finally come full circle. The pain was still there, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was a reminder, not a wound. When she got home that night, she opened her old journal and wrote, Curiosity made me lose love. Silence taught me what love really means. I thought redemption was about getting someone back, but it's really about becoming someone new. She closed the notebook, placed it on the table, and smiled. Outside, the snow kept falling soft, forgiving. Endless dot, and for the first time in years, Lena didn't feel broken. She just felt human, and that was enough. Emma Reynolds was 35, a successful marketing consultant living in Seattle, married to Mark for almost 10 years. On paper, her life looked perfect. A stable marriage, a modest but beautiful house, and a routine that made her feel secure. Yet every morning, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who had stopped smiling with her eyes. Her husband was kind, responsible, and loyal. But lately, their love felt like a familiar habit instead of something alive. Their evenings were predictable. Mark came home from work. They ate dinner in silence while the television played softly in the background. And then he would fall asleep on the couch. Emma used to fill the quiet with books or music. But even those no longer distracted her from the emptiness that grew like a quiet ache inside her chest. One Thursday night, as rain tapped gently against the window, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a message from an old friend, Natalie, someone she hadn't seen in nearly a decade. Hey, stranger. We're having a mini college reunion this Saturday. Just me, Jason, and Tyler so far. You better come. It's been forever. Emma stared at the message, her fingers hesitating. The names took her back to her early 20s, those carefree years when life was all energy and laughter. When they thought they could do anything. Natalie had always been the adventurous one. Jason was the charmer with too much confidence, and Tyler quiet, observant. Always the one who noticed what others didn't. For a long minute, Emma didn't reply. Then she typed back, I don't know if I can make it. Been busy with work and life. Almost instantly, Natalie responded, You've been saying that for years. Just one night, Em. No excuses. Emma smiled, shaking her head. Maybe it wouldn't hurt. Maybe a night away from her routine could help her breathe again. She typed, "Okay, one night." By Saturday evening, the city glowed under a silver drizzle. Emma spent longer than usual getting ready. Not for anyone in particular, but for herself. She slipped into a soft navy dress, curled her hair lightly, and looked in the mirror. For a second, she saw the girl she used to be, the one who laughed loudly and believed in second chances. The restaurant Natalie chose was downtown, warm lights, soft music, and a hum of weekend chatter. When Emma walked in, Natalie waved excitedly from across the room. "There she is! Look at you!" Emma laughed as Natalie hugged her tightly. "You haven't changed," she said. "Neither have you," Natalie replied, her smile wide but her eyes observant. "You look steadier, but maybe too steady." Before Emma could answer, Jason appeared. He looked older, a few gray strands at his temples, but his grin was the same. "Emma Reynolds, I don't believe it. You still make every room brighter. Still a charmer, huh?" she teased, shaking his hand. Then Tyler rose from his seat quietly. "Hey," he said softly, his voice deep and calm. His presence felt different, grounded but distant. The four of them sat down, and just like that, years melted away. They talked about college, old professors, bad dorm food, wild nights that now felt like someone else's memories. Laughter came easily, almost too easily. For a moment, Emma forgot the life waiting for her back home. Over dinner, Natalie mentioned how she'd divorced last year. "I realized I'd been living beside someone, not with them," she said, taking a slow sip of wine. "I wanted to feel alive again." Emma's hand froze on her glass. Those words hit something inside her. Tyler noticed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Emma smiled weakly. "Yeah, just thinking." Jason leaned forward, his tone playful. "Emma's always been the deep thinker. Remember when she used to spend hours sketching by the lake?" She laughed softly. "Those were good days." "Maybe they can be again," Tyler said suddenly, his voice steady but meaningful. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Too long. Later, that night, they left the restaurant and wandered through the nearby park. The city lights shimmered through the wet leaves, and everything smelled of rain and memories. Natalie walked ahead with Jason, their laughter echoing, while Emma and Tyler lagged behind. "It's strange," Emma said softly, "how years pass and you don't even realize you've stopped feeling." Tyler looked at her. "I think feeling doesn't stop. We just forget how to listen to it." His words lingered. She didn't reply, but something in her chest tightened. When they reached the cars, Natalie turned to her. "We're planning a weekend at the lake house next week. Just the four of us. Like old times." "You have to come," Emma hesitated. "I don't know if Mark would." "Oh, come on," Natalie interrupted with a grin. "You need a break, a little laughter. You've earned it." Tyler glanced at her but said nothing. Emma smiled faintly. "We'll see." When she got home that night, the house was dark except for the glow of the television. Mark was asleep on the couch, the remote still in his hand. She stood there for a long moment, just watching him. He looked peaceful, the way he always did, but distant, like they were living two separate stories under one roof. She went upstairs, changed quietly, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her phone buzzed again. It was Natalie. "Next Friday. Don't cancel," Emma typed back. "I'll think about it." Then Tyler's name appeared beneath it. A simple message. "It was good seeing you tonight." She stared at it, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. After a long pause, she replied, "You too." She set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and lay awake, staring into the dark. She told herself it was just friendship, nostalgia, nothing more. But in her heart, she knew something had shifted, something she couldn't name. Something dangerous and alive. Outside. The rain kept falling softly against the window, like the sound of time moving forward, and deep inside, Emma knew this wasn't just a reunion. It was the beginning of a test she didn't even realize she'd have to face. The following Friday arrived faster than Emma expected. The week had been a blur. Work meetings, quick dinners, and a quiet tension at home that neither she nor Mark talked about. He'd been distracted lately, often working late or scrolling through his phone during dinner. Emma didn't complain. She didn't even ask where his mind went. Somewhere between the years of comfort and distance. She had learned that silence was easier than confrontation. But that night, as she packed a small bag for the weekend trip, guilt tugged at her chest. She wasn't lying exactly. She'd told Mark she was going for a college reunion weekend with old friends. Still, she hadn't told him who those friends were. "Where's the reunion again?" he asked, half distracted, while tying his tie for an early meeting. "Up near the lake," she said, keeping her tone light. "Just a small gathering." "Natalie's idea?" He nodded without much interest. "Sounds good. You need a break." She smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe I do." The drive to the lake house took nearly 3 hours. The road wound through tall pine trees, and the late spring air smelled of damp soil and blooming wildflowers. As she neared the house, she felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. Natalie's voice echoed before she even got out of the car. "Emma, you made it." The lake house was beautiful. Old wood, wide windows, and a back porch that looked out over the still silver water. Jason was grilling on the patio, humming to himself. While Tyler was setting out plates on the table, look who finally decided to join the fun. Jason teased, waving a spatula. "We were about to send a search party." Emma laughed. "I almost turned around twice." "Good thing you didn't," Natalie said, handing her a glass of lemonade. "This weekend is about forgetting the world." For a while, it felt like that was exactly what they did. The group spent the afternoon talking, cooking, and laughing about things that didn't matter. The air was filled with music and memories, and for the first time in years, Emma felt light again. As the sun began to set, the lake shimmered gold. They moved to the porch with wine and blankets, watching the water turn pink and violet under the fading sky. "Remember senior year?" Jason said, smiling. "The camping trip by that broken pier." "Oh, don't remind me," Natalie laughed. "You tried to cook fish on a stick and nearly burned down the whole forest." Tyler chuckled quietly. And Emma had to save the day, as always. Emma smiled softly. "I think that was the first time I realized none of us were really adults yet." They laughed, but Tyler's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. That look, calm, steady, unreadable, made her heart shift again. Later that night, Natalie and Jason decided to take a walk down the trail by the water. "You two coming?" she called out. Tyler shook his head. "We'll stay here. I'll clean up." When they were gone, the air felt quiet except for the sound of crickets and the soft waves lapping against the shore. Emma helped him clear the table, folding napkins and stacking glasses. "You always were the responsible one," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Maybe too responsible." He glanced at her, his eyes serious. "You seem different." "Sad?" "Maybe." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out at the lake. "Do you ever feel like you built a life so carefully that you forgot to live it?" Tyler leaned on the railing beside her. "Every day. After my divorce, I thought I'd start over. But I realized I'd spent years giving so much to someone who stopped seeing me. I didn't even recognize myself anymore." His words hit something deep inside her. She looked down, her voice soft. "That sounds familiar." They stood in silence for a while. The world felt still, like even time had stopped to listen. When she finally spoke again, her voice trembled slightly. "Sometimes I miss the person I used to be, the one who wasn't afraid to take chances." Tyler's gaze was steady. "Maybe she's still there, just waiting for you to notice her again." Emma's breath caught. For a moment she felt something awaken, not attraction, not desire, but a raw human ache for connection. Then Natalie's voice called from the trail, and the spell broke. Emma stepped back quickly, her heart racing. "We should get some rest," she said quietly. "Yeah," he replied. "Good night, Emma." That night, she lay awake in her room, listening to the rain tapping against the roof. She thought about Tyler's words, about her marriage, and about the hollow space she had learned to ignore. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't living either. The next morning, they made breakfast together. The atmosphere felt lighter, more comfortable. Jason cracked jokes, Natalie danced barefoot in the kitchen. And for the first time in years, Emma laughed until her cheeks hurt. Later, the group decided to go canoeing on the lake. The sun shimmered on the water as they paddled out, the air filled with the sound of birds and distant laughter. For a moment, everything felt simple again. No worries, no guilt, just peace. When the sun began to dip, they returned to shore. Jason built a small fire, and they sat around it as the sky deepened into twilight. The warmth of the flames made everyone relax, and the conversation turned to love. The kind that changes people. "Do you think love can fade?" Natalie asked suddenly, her tone reflective. "Love doesn't fade," Tyler said quietly. "People just stop tending to it." Emma looked at him, and he looked back. There was no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. She wanted to look away, but COULDN single quotes to Jason broke the silence with a laugh. "You two always did get too deep for me. Love's messy." "That's all I know." Everyone laughed, and the moment passed. But deep inside, Emma knew something had shifted again. That night, when she went inside to get her sweater, she found her phone buzzing. It was a message from Mark. "Hope you're having fun. Don't stay up too late." She stared at the message for a long time. The words were kind but distant, like a note left on a refrigerator. She typed back, "I'm fine. See you Sunday." She set the phone down and stood by the window, watching the reflection of the fire outside. Tyler was sitting alone now, staring into the flames, his face thoughtful for a long time. She just watched and realized she wasn't the only one trying to fill an empty space. When she finally stepped back outside, Tyler looked up. Their eyes met once more, a quiet understanding passing between them. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The fire crackled softly, and the night wrapped around them like a secret neither wanted to say aloud. And in that stillness, Emma realized the truth she had been avoiding. She wasn't searching for love. She was searching for herself. The rain began early Sunday morning. It fell in steady streams, tapping softly against the windows of the lake house. Emma stood by the window, a cup of coffee in her hand, watching the gray ripples move across the water. She felt calm but restless, as if the storm outside had found its echo inside her. The weekend had been beautiful and heavy all at once. There had been laughter, warmth, and the quiet comfort of being seen again. But beneath it all lay an unspoken truth, something that neither she nor Tyler dared to name. Natalie entered the kitchen, her hair in a loose bun, eyes sleepy. "You're up early," she said, reaching for a mug. "Couldn't sleep," Emma replied softly. Natalie smiled knowingly. "I get it. Sometimes silence is louder than noise." Emma looked at her, wondering if Natalie saw through her calm expression. She probably did. Old friends always did. By noon, the rain cleared. They packed up their bags, cleaned the kitchen, and loaded the cars. The air felt heavy with the weight of goodbyes. "Same time next year?" Jason asked, smiling as he closed the trunk. "Definitely," Natalie said, hugging Emma tightly. "Don't disappear again, okay?" Emma smiled faintly. "I won't." When she turned to Tyler, words failed her. He just gave a small nod. "Take care, Emma. You too." Their hands brushed for a second, accidental, brief, but enough to make her heart tighten. Then he walked away, and she stood there, realizing that something in her had quietly changed forever. The drive home felt longer than before. The closer she got to her neighborhood, the more her thoughts tangled. What did she want from her life now? What did she want from her marriage? Mark wasn't cruel or careless. He was just absent. But maybe she had been too. When she stepped through the front door, the house smelled faintly of cedar and lemon cleaner. Mark was in the living room, sitting with his laptop open. "Hey," he said, smiling politely. "How was the trip?" "It was good," she said, hanging up her coat. "Peaceful? Glad to hear it." He closed his laptop and stood. "Dinner later?" She nodded, though her voice caught slightly. "Sure." That evening, as they ate, she watched him the way he spoke about work, the small lines around his eyes, the comfort in his routine. He wasn't a bad man, just a distant one. And maybe, she realized, she'd let that distance grow too wide. After dinner, Mark went upstairs to make a call. Emma sat at the table for a while, her mind a storm. Then she quietly followed him. When he hung up, she said softly, "Mark, can we talk?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. What's going on?" She hesitated, searching for words. "I think somewhere along the way, we stopped seeing each other. We became comfortable, maybe too comfortable, and I'm not blaming you. I think I let it happen too." He frowned slightly. "Is this about the trip?" "No," she said quickly. "It's about everything. About us, I miss feeling connected to you." Mark exhaled slowly and sat down on the bed. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he said, "You're right. I've been distracted. Work, stress. I thought I was doing enough just by being here." Emma's throat tightened. "You were here. Yes, but it felt like you weren't." He nodded slowly. "I know. And maybe you weren't here either." She froze at his words. Not because they were cruel, but because they were true. They sat in silence. Two people surrounded by years of love and distance. Finally, he spoke again. "Do you still want this? Us?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I do. But I want it to mean something again." Mark looked at her for a long time, then reached for her hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a beginning. "Then maybe we start over," he said quietly. "Not from the beginning, just from right now." Something broke inside her, not in pain, but in relief. She nodded, her hand tightening around his. "I'd like that." The following weeks felt different. Not perfect, not easy, but real. They began talking more, walking together after dinner, even cooking on weekends. Sometimes silence still filled the room, but it wasn't the cold kind anymore. It was peaceful. One afternoon, Emma received a text from Natalie. "Tyler got a new job in Seattle. He asked about you." Emma stared at the message for a long time. She didn't reply immediately. She didn't know what to say. Eventually, she typed back, "Tell him I wish him the best." That night, she went for a walk by herself. The air was cool, the sun dipping low beyond the neighborhood trees. She thought about Tyler, the calmness in his voice, the truth in his eyes. He had reminded her of something she'd forgotten, that love wasn't about excitement or escape. It was about being seen. And in some strange way, she realized, it helped her see herself again. When she returned home, Mark was on the couch watching an old movie. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," she said softly, sitting beside him. "I just needed some air." He smiled. "You've seemed lighter lately." She looked at him, her eyes gentle. "Maybe I am. Maybe I finally stopped running from my own life." He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he didn't need to. He just reached for her hand, and she let him. Months passed. Summer turned to fall. Life became simple again, but in a way that felt new. Emma started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. She met Natalie for lunch every few weeks. And sometimes they'd laugh about old times, letting nostalgia warm them without holding them back. One afternoon, while cleaning her closet, Emma found the small photo album from college, pictures of them by the lake, laughing, wild, free. There was one photo of her and Tyler sitting side by side, both smiling at the camera. She touched the picture gently, a small smile forming. It wasn't regret she felt, it was gratitude. Some people come into your life not to stay, but to help you remember who you are. She slipped the photo back into the album and closed it. When Mark came home that evening, she greeted him with a smile. "You're home early," she said. "Traffic was light," he replied, hanging his coat. "Want to go out for dinner?" She hesitated, then smiled warmly. "I'd love that." As they walked out together, the sky glowed with the soft colors of sunset. Emma felt something she hadn't in a long time, contentment. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer lost. She had faced the truth, walked through the quiet storm of her own heart, and come out whole. And as she slipped her arm through Mark's, she whispered silently to herself, Maybe love doesn't fade. It just waits for us to find it again.